Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. It's obviously Monday. It's the playoff finals we're looking back at, Dave. It's the end of the season, and this is where some rise to the challenge and become MVP, and some the lights are too bright. And we're going to find out over the next however long which one of those two categories we fall into here as we look back over the playoff finals. Let's start with actually, before I get into the women's game, let's start with the event itself. It's interesting because I'm working at these things, and what people probably don't realize is when you're doing commentary in a headset similar to this, you've got two people constantly talking in your ears. The director and the PA are they're not talking to me most of the time, but about 10% of the time they are. So I have to sort of listen to them. And then obviously I've got Roe and Lasker and Tuck and Siobhan and whoever else talking as well. So it's quite loud in my head. So sometimes I'll come home from a game and I won't really have noticed what happened. You know what I mean? Because you're making TV, you don't know. But actually I did get a sense of the occasion yesterday. It felt like a really good event. The crowd were in it. It was, I mean, it's a lovely, as well. It's a lovely building for basketball.
It's fantastic.
And just really got the sense of occasion there. And I think it's worth sort of noting.
Yeah, well, it's two things, isn't there? I mean, one, you didn't have it last year. You did the best you could last year. So that kind of going back, and it's the first time it's been done with the production, the buzz production stuff. Which is important. The second thing is obviously you have two London teams in, which kind of gives a rooting interest. And that does make a difference, because it's not the same with neutral crowds are great and getting all the people in there is great, but if you've got a real rooting interest, that makes it good. And obviously the third thing was you got a close game, and a game at the end, certainly the second game, and not just a close game, but an oscillating game, a game which went back and forwards. And that always kind of adds to the atmosphere as well. But look, it's a great place. I mean, it's awesome. It's certainly the highlight of anything I've ever done in basketball, standing there, looking up thinking, bloody hell.
15, when you look up and you see the people up in the third tier and they're kind of in the dark, so you can't always really make them out, but you go, wow, that's a lot of people up there.
It's a lot of people. It's like 15, it really does. It puts everybody, it gives everybody legitimately something to play for. And it is the best argument for not having series and playoffs, the fact that you get a day like that. It really is. You can't take away from it. It's unfortunate. I know you had some problems setting up, and I know it was a bit hectic. And the fans weren't in there for about an hour, and it was back to middays again.
We can fully put the blame on Little Mix. Essentially,
two of them are Geordies.
Yeah.
So two of them. At least one of them's a Geordie.
I have no idea. I couldn't name you a Little Mix song. I'm afraid.
No, but she's from my court neck of the woods. Perry, I think. It might be Jade, one of them. Anyway, yeah.
You seem to know the names. Were you watching the live stream on Saturday night? But so essentially, so people know, because obviously I don't think they ever pointed out the fact that the game was half an hour late, tipping off the WBBL final. I think the set for Little Mix took a lot longer to break down than it was supposed to. So they were in 2.5 hours. So we went on air. They were still putting the floor seating together. Yeah. It was a bit chaotic. And literally we got told as the credits were running, we were having to delay the tip off by half an hour because they couldn't get anybody in. But
good news for those broadcast pros you've got
ripped up right there. But to be fair to Nat and Siobhan and Kieran and that, I don't think you would have noticed watching. It's one of those live.
Yeah, they handled it really well. There was one moment where Tuck said, "I'm handing it back to you," where he basically after he'd been dumped on by Nat. But apart from that, no, I really quite enjoyed it. It was good. You guys did a good job.
So let's go to the games, and obviously London Lions 70, Sevenoaks Suns 45 in the WBBL playoff final. London, of course, chasing perfection. We were saying at the beginning the only way that the Suns could win this game was keeping it low scoring, because they weren't going to beat London in the scoring race. and Monacana hits a 3. They're out to 5-0. More importantly, though, London only got 2 Holly Winterburn scores in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, there was a couple of things. One, Leonard obviously was hurt early, playing with a mascot, and that's not easy. And you saw it in the interview afterwards. She's got a decent shiner.
Right shiner.
And so that kind of impacts their flow a little bit, their offensive flow. And the second thing is you're playing half an hour later, there's people coming in the gym, there's panic, there's everything going on around you. So offensively, that is going to be a struggle for both teams. And it was. The third thing is that sometimes having so many players who are playing roles doesn't help you in finals. You have to have the one or two main players, or the ones that you rely on more. There's only so many shots to go around, and having 10, really solid players does you wonders in a league season. But then you're chipping and changing a little bit in the finals. So they missed a lot of layups. London did early. They were getting better shots than Sevenoaks, but they weren't able to finish. And unfortunately, with Sevenoaks, London's defense was actually far better than their offense. Defensively, they had an athletic advantage at every position, just about. And if they didn't inside, they had a size advantage. So everywhere you look, there's an advantage for London. Stewart over is it John? I can't remember the girl's name from. Yes, Koppel. Sorry. Even and then at the guard spot, Winterburn and Leedham have the size that and the size and quickness that Carr and Bush don't really have. And so everything was hard for Sevenoaks. And on top of that, London are they're not just turning up and playing and throwing their talent out there. They're actually coached insofar as game preparation really well. And they're disciplined, and they've got a scouting report. So it wasn't just say, we've got more talent than you, we'll beat you anyway. They took away some stuff. They took away Cat Carr. They took away Bush's 3-point shooting. Now
really,
it's really easy. Now, to be fair, it's easier to do that when you've got the talent to do that, because they're thinking, if we take away 2 or 3 things, we can shut this team down. Sevenoaks are thinking, if we take away 7 or 8 things, we can shut this team down. And you can't take away 7 or 8 things. So what Sevenoaks did was they had a good game plan. They didn't give up anything easy to Stewart inside. They handled Leonard in the screen and roll, well early. Winterburn had a couple of size mismatches on the post. And then obviously you have the shooting variance in the big gym and the short warm-up and all of that stuff. And then the MVP came in and basically won the game. And it wasn't the MVP that won the MVP. It was the MVP. I thought it was the MVP because she changed the game.
So we were wondering if London would set records in that game. They did set a record in the first quarter for the lowest scoring first quarter in a playoff final, WBBL playoff final. But then Beckford Norton, you're referring to there, came into the game, back-to-back threes. In 2 minutes, she scored the first 11 points of an 18-2 run, which had them 25-14 up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real skill to be able to be effective in a, coming off the bench in a final. It really is. I mean, just put to one side that they're bringing Beckford Norton and Breen off the bench, which is like, again, it's the 7 or 8 things, but to everybody else is tight. Even Leedham was tight. Even because we think of, Joe Leedham obviously played in the Olympics, Xenia Stewart played in the Olympics, they played in the big gym in the Olympics, or a big kind of cardboard box, really. That's what it was, because it was a temporary structure with 11,000 people in, but it was a bit weird. I don't think they didn't make it to the O2, I don't think, because that was the quarter in the finals and the semi-finals for the Olympics. So they won't have played at the O2 either, unless you can tell me otherwise. And obviously on top of that, they're playing for the 4. And so that makes you tight. That means that if anything, you're over-focused. You saw at the first play of the game where Leedham ran over, I think it was Carr, one of the Sevenoaks defenders, got the charging foul, and you look back and her eyes were just like, I'm just as focused as I can ever be. And that can sometimes just impinge your relaxation and getting into a flow of a game. So the Lions starters are really tight. And then for Beckford Norton to come in and to play so fearlessly and aggressively and athletically and knock down the shots when nobody else had, when it's easy to kind of fall into that path of, oh, well, everybody else is taking a few shots to get warmed up. She came in, the game was changed, and they couldn't, once it got to 10 to 12 points, there was another, Sevenoaks did have another run in them, but that run basically separated them for good. And then because of the depth that they have, and the only way you can beat a team that's far deeper than you is to prey on their minds, prey on their uncertainty, make them get antsy because they should be winning by more, try and impact their mental state that way. And that run from that single-handed run by Beckford Norton basically took away any, I think, lack of confidence that London might have had, any kind of nerves or inertia they might have had. So that's why I thought she was the MVP, because the game was won in that 5 minutes. Now the game doesn't mean it was over, but it was won.
Well, they got back to 2 points on a 9-0 run late in the first half, and then right before half time, on a corner, goes up, thinks she's fouled, doesn't get a call, argues the call, gets a technical foul. That's her third foul, and obviously we talk about the comparative depth of the two teams. They can ill afford somebody in foul trouble. There's 4 seconds left. Winterburn scores the free throw, and then Beckford Norton scores on the buzzer, and you sort of think, well, if Monacona had scored there, or if she had got a foul and made 2 free throws, it's 27 all, and instead it's 30 to 25.
Yeah, and on top of that, she had the last shot as well. She gave up the last shot, so London didn't have to get the ball back. So London ended up getting a 3-0 when the very worst should have been 0-0 or 2-0. I didn't like the technical, really, because I thought, and then she said something which was way beyond the pale, which you couldn't make out on the TV. There was a gesture, but I thought there were gestures. I thought there was a couple of London ladies, made a couple of gestures, particularly in the second half when they didn't get a call as well. I just thought it was a very, very quick whistle for that technical with 6 seconds to go. It may be that had been some consistent complaining that might be why it was just kind of enough was enough. But I thought you could let that go. It was good. It was a good call. Good no call, sorry. But let it go. But you're right. And then I think the first play of the third quarter, London came out and scored as well. So I think I looked at it and it was like 6-0 run in like 30 seconds of real time. Which really made changed a 2-point game to an 8-point game. And then it's like they've climbed their way back up to base camp, Sevenoaks. And then you're back down to the hotel at the bottom again. And you got to do it all over again. And you got to do it all over again with players who've played twice as many minutes as the London players.
And you could see it in Jo Leedham-Warner's eyes, really, in that third quarter. This was the moment, and she was doing it at both ends of the floor. I think she had 7 points in the run that got them out to 12, and they sort of were always close enough that you thought that it seemed possible that they could come back, but it was never quite close enough that you actually believed that was going to happen. And then in the fourth quarter,
if you score 45 points in a game, then you say they were close enough, but they would have ended up needing another 22 minutes of basketball to catch up. To get to 70. And so it's, that gap in the low scoring games. But London's defense was, the one thing that their role players really do is they do commit to defense, and they didn't finish, and Charles didn't really finish, and Ume didn't finish, and Breen really never got going. But they all, every pass into the post was challenged. Every bit of penetration was blocked, and they did it without fouling. And they did have a slight size advantage, and they did have a slight athletic advantage, which allows you to do that. But they also were incredibly disciplined in the way that they played their defense. And I thought Sevenoaks really stood up to them really well at the other end. They didn't give up anything easy. They were played tough. They rebounded the ball. They didn't they didn't lose out to the size of London, which they couldn't have. They didn't really let London get out and run, which is a way to the game being over even quicker. But eventually, when you've got to work that hard to get a shot, it just grates on you. You only got 7 players that you're playing. You just can't manage it. And it's just, there's an imbalance, unfortunately. There is an imbalance of talent, I think, on effort levels. That game was a well-played game. I don't think London maximised talent level because they didn't make as many shots as they can and they weren't as fluent as they can, but there was a lot on the game. But what they did do was give a great clinic in how to grind out a game where you're not shooting the ball well. You know.
Well, it was still only 44-38 with 10 minutes to go, but then Leonard with 3 3-pointers early in the fourth quarter took it out past 20, and that was why I think she was given.
In reality, you know, Leonard threes are things that you have to live with when you've got everything else that London have got. If you're Len Bush, you're thinking, you know, if she gets hot, you know, we can't. If we take that away, we run her off. She's going to start setting other people up that we really can't let go off. So you've got to try and challenge them. But eventually, she got her feet and she shot the ball as well. And one of them is going to make shots. And the only way it could have stayed close was if, you know, Beckford Norton hadn't gone off on that run and they'd managed to kind of keep it to a 22 game at half time. Because then London might have got a little bit antsy. But there's been nothing in London's demeanor this year which has really led you to believe that even that would have happened.
No. So Leonard was the MVP with 13 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, a plus 32 in 32 minutes, the biggest plus minus of anybody. Beckford Norton was the Dave Forrester MVP with 15
Absolutely.
points. Winterburn 12 and 7, Leadham Warner 11, 6 and 4. The interesting stat I pulled out, London had 21 more shots than Sevenoaks. It was 58-79. They didn't shoot the ball very well, but you get that many more possessions.
They have that much more size, you know, and that much more, not just size on the court, but size on the bench. And everybody's coming in and doing their job, so they're all going in there and rebound. And if your guards like Leadham, Warner, and Winterburn have that size, and they're getting the cheap offensive rebounds as well, and then they're playing 25 minutes or 30 minutes, and the other girls on the other team are playing 40 minutes. It's just an absolute grinding process. Just grind them down. And the offensive rebounding is where that often shows the most. Probably particularly actually more, and I don't watch as much women's basketball as I watch men's basketball, obviously. I don't like to compare. But you know, this is a podcast, so let's compare. In women's basketball, in men's basketball, probably because you have these people who can just get rebounds just by jumping 12 feet in the air. There are less kind of long rebounds to go for in men's basketball than there are in women's basketball, and therefore the more guard rebounds, everybody can get in there and get one. And I just think the size of and the mentality of Winterburn and Leadham, having that size at the guard spots really helped them, because it's just another person you've got to put a body on, and they just didn't have enough to do it in the end.
Monacana playing her final game with 13 points led the Suns. Was 12 and 9. I thought she was pretty good actually. And Kat Carr, as you say, had to work very hard for the 10 points that she managed. So let's move on to the BBL playoff final, and the Leicester Riders 78, the London Lions 75, and we can't do a London Lions bit of the podcast without announcing the starting 5 at the beginning, because we've been talking about it all season. Washburn, Kajini, Dirk Williams, Reese, and Tawia were the 5 they chose to go for yesterday. What did you make of that, Dave?
Well, firstly, yeah. Well, apologies to anybody who was obviously doing Twitter yesterday, because I thought about 5 minutes before the game, I thought, I'll stuff this. Rather than talk about this afterwards, let's have a go at talking about it as it's happening and see how much of it I get right and how much of it is crap. Because it's easy, you know, there's a certain point of things it's easy to say afterwards, oh, I told you so, when everyone's had 36 hours to look at it. So hopefully everything that I say here will be stuff I said at the time, because looking back on it, I think it reads pretty well. There's certainly not much which I kind of resile from. Probably other than Tawia's performance, which was exceptional, which I didn't see coming. But even then, I think they made a mistake not starting Kelly. I just, you know, you have to get the best out of your guys, the best out of your players, and they got probably 110% out of Chris Tawia, who played great. But as a result of that, they got 20% out of Kyla Kelly. And I think because Chris Tawia's ceiling is there and Kyla Kelly's ceiling is there, I think Leicester would have took that, because, you know, you've got a guy who's blocked shots, more shots than anybody for however long, he'll tell us. who was a lob threat, who was on the, who was a real difference maker on the court, and he played 10 minutes, 55 seconds. Now you say, well, that could have happened any which way. Of course it could. And the logic is, oh, well, we'll bring him off. If this is the logic, and it's the only one that's ever been put forward that I've heard, we'll bring him off the bench because he's potentially getting into foul trouble early. Well, my mindset is if you're going to get into foul trouble, you're going to get into foul trouble. And it doesn't matter whether you get it within 2 minutes of coming in off the bench or whether 2 minutes of starting the game. But what I do know from finals is that if you're not used to being a bench player, it can be so difficult to use the right amount of aggression and to let the game come to you the way you need to positively impact the game. And I think what happened with Kelly when Kelly came in this game was that he actually was bristling with positive intent. And there was a couple of other Lions players who were the same, but was trying to almost, do as much as he could, as quickly as he could. And he made a couple of bad decisions in relation to into fouls, which I don't necessarily think he would have made if he'd had that comfort level of knowing that he was going to get the rhythm of the game from the beginning. It also meant not starting him that he ended up matched up with Mo Walker straight away, which, I didn't see that on any level as a strategically good idea on any level. So this isn't about Tauia, because Tauia did everything they could, and if they wouldn't have been one of the reasons why. But if you told Leicester the minutes that Tauia would play and the minutes that Kelly would play, they would have been happy. So I thought that was a mistake, but I still think it was a mistake. I think the minutes that Reece might have played 3 minutes in that game with Kelly, maybe 5, because there was a time when he was out when Kelly was in. Yeah. And that is just, oof. But that said, having said all of that, London starting 5 basically creamed Leicester starting 5.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
In both halves.
Yeah.
And that lineup, and talked about it a little bit as it was going on. Basically, Dirk Williams was electrified early on, good and bad. Good was because he was making plays all over the place. He was full of energy. He was full of emotion. He was diving on the floor. He was getting steals. Bad because he couldn't control it, and he ended up picking up 3 fouls. And I thought London's strategy. I'm talking a lot about London here because they were kind of the unknown quantity coming in. So it's not because I'm not interested in Leicester. It's just because they were, strategically, critically more interesting to me at this point. London's strategy on Leicester, in relation to Leicester starting 5, I thought was excellent. They had a game plan. They were ready. Gino spent the first quarter kind of waiting to see where his teammates were, looking around, seeing what was there. So he wasn't immediately aggressive. And Whelan and Loving were not impactful in the game at all. And the spacing that London had on offense allowed them to get good shots, which means that Leicester are picking it out and they can't run. So their game plan was obviously, as I think you said in commentary, was to throw different bodies at Crandall.
Yeah. Well, that was the interesting thing, was because they were quite aggressive and physical with Crandall, which I think is the right way to sort of attack it. But the interesting thing was they seemed to have a plan for who went when, because there was one time where Dirk had just been called for a foul and he went to Washburn and he went, "You go to him, I've just got a foul." So they were passing him along, and it's almost like, I think he ended up drawing 7 fouls, Crandall. So it was almost like they were taking that as a byproduct.
I actually tweeted about that because you commented on it and they didn't do it properly, and they gave him a backdoor the next possession. And I actually tweeted that I thought that was actually a mistake, because there's a risk that you overburden players if they're guarding different guys in a game. If you're guarding 3 different guys in a game within 4 or 5 minutes of each other, that's difficult, right? Because you're asking players to remember different things. Now, Dirk Williams picks up a foul on Gino Crandall. That's fine. That's just a foul saying, "I'm here." But before that game started, I would be saying to Dirk Williams, "Look, you have, if he's the guy, you have the primary assignment on Gino Crandall. That's going to be your job." Now, it wouldn't have been the guy for me. It would have been Washburn, because I think they needed Williams' offense at the other end, and Washburn would have just utterly focused on the defensive side. But that's the way they went. That's fair enough. But then he gets a foul, but then, okay, now it's somebody else. Then it's Josh Ward here. He comes in, they're going to give him the job. And Dirk is now guarding somebody else on the baseline. And then Dirk decides he's going to go and double on Mo Walker on a fadeaway jump shot to get his second foul, which was a bad foul. You know, he didn't have to go and double, but he saw Walker on Kelly, which is that lineup that I talked about. So London have it in their head that that's not great either. And, you know, Kyler Kelly has to be able to defend another centre in this league without a double team. Williams saw it. He had been guarding the ball, but now he's guarding on the baseline. So it's his man if he's going to go and double. Walker fades away and Williams flies 12 feet out of his position, out of his area to try and make a play. Well, you like that energy, but it's dumb. You know, you can't pick up that second foul because at the point he picked up that second foul, London had something on the lines of 25 points, 20.
It was 17-27.
27 points in a minute, in 8.5 minutes, right?
2 minutes to play when he got that second foul.
Yeah, 8.5 minutes. So they had 27 points at that point. And picking up that foul because of that matchup, which was which I would never have had, because by that point, for me, it would have been Tawier guarding Walker and bodying him up. And picking up that foul because he'd been guarding the ball and now he's guarding the baseline, really impacted the game negatively for London. And the question is then, and he got a bit lucky actually, Williams, because he got a steal earlier on, and then he went, and if he got the ball off whoever it was, he threw it to Washburn for a layup, and he went straight into whichever the Riders player's face wasn't. Basically started talking to him, which was probably a technical in any other game other than this one. So his emotion, and I tweeted about it at the time, his emotion was good and bad. And the risk of playing a level team like Leicester with an over-emotional team like London, or an emotional bunch of players, is that they're not going to go away, but you can't maintain that height and that level. And I thought that was kind of the case. The second thing that happened was London didn't have a plan beyond the starting five. They didn't have, Leicester, I could just about tell you a couple of times I actually predicted, again, Rob's substitutions on Twitter, but Leicester, you could see who was playing when they were going to play. London, having scored, 27 points with Dirk Williams in the game, and primarily it was the Cugini, Dirk Williams, Reece triumvirate that really helped them, because that gives spacing. Also, when Ward Hibbert came in for Cugini, Reece kind of went all on his own. The spacing wasn't there as much, so Reece just basically made some shots. Went behind his back, made a couple of really tough threes, harder shots that if you're Leicester, you're happy with. But then, the beginning of the second quarter, suddenly Dirk Williams has got 2 fouls. Kyler Kelly's got 2 fouls. Isaiah Reece is getting a little bit tired. They had no plan for Connor.
No. So yeah, we've talked a lot about London. Let's give you an opportunity to get your Connor Washington fan club badge out and stick it on.
I mean,
2 clean 3-pointers either side of the first quarter break, and what was a 10-point lead becomes a 3-point lead.
The Leicester played okay in the first quarter. I actually tweeted, it reminded me of the game that we played against London in the first game at the O2 7 years ago. Because London, Joachim Wynn and Drew Sullivan made some threes early, and they were up about 10 in the first quarter. They went off on a red hot start as well. And we were quite a consistent kind of team at that point level. And we had confidence that, the shooting would come back to the median, it would revert. And it did. And London were playing off a lot of energy and a lot of intensity, but we had some confidence. And I felt the same, and I saw the same in Leicester. That's what they've been all year. And because they know who's playing, they know when they're going to play, and they're all absolutely bought in and settled into that role. But the second thing you have to have for Leicester after the plan for Crandall and Nelson Henry is the plan for Washington. And they had none. And I knew that. I mean, the play when Connacht, he actually got a couple of open shots to get his eye in before he made one. And you think, okay, he's being aggressive, they're going to have to guard him. And they didn't. At one point early in the second quarter, Reece was tired, I don't think he respected Connor the way that he was respecting everybody else. Maybe he was a bit tired. He didn't defend him. He gave up a 3. Didn't get the rebound. Connor knocked down the 3 on the offensive rebound. That's a big play. And then I look at who's on the court for London at that point, because I know who's going to be on the court for Leicester. You know, it's going to be Connor Washington. You know, it's going to be Kimber McKenzie, probably the best underused player in the history of the playoff finals, by the way. It's definitely going to be either Jackson or Whelan, and it's going to be Adekoya, and it's going to be Walker. That's going to be their lineup for around that first quarter break. Yeah. Right. And you have to have a plan for that. And who are the threats on that lineup? Well, you've got to stop the ball. You've got to be able to defend Walker inside, because I look to throw the ball in the post and work off him. But you've got to defend Connor, because Connor's a 44% career 3-point shooter, and he's played in a ton of these games. And by defending him, that means you've got to make him penetrate. He never had to go. I don't think he set foot inside the key offensively in the whole game. Never once. He got to shoot 3s, but he never once made him penetrate. And I'm looking at London, and I'm thinking, if I had that, look, they've got a ton of players there, right? Bradley Kabuza, right? Finals are about finding roles for players and just neutralizing whatever you need to neutralize, winning your individual battles, whatever it was. With us, I mean, going back 6-7 years, it was actually Lasker. Lasker will come off the bench and say, right, you got Connor. Or a guy, or in the trophy final 2 years ago, you got Elliot Sentence, or whoever it was. You stop him. You'd fight it, and you would say, you match his energy. That's your job. You do that. That's what you can do for our team, because our team can win that way. And I'm looking at Kaboza thinking, wow, kid with a ton of energy. He's in people's faces. He's kind of, without wishing to say it, he's Connor a decade ago. When Connor was just starting to play in these games. He has a chance. It doesn't mean he's going to be Connor in a decade's time. 100 things can go wrong. Yeah. But he has, they've given him a bit of time. He's played some games. He's shown he can be on the court, but he has to have a role. Well, his role in that game for me had to be, you're going to go and you're going to out Connor. Because it's only going to be for 4 or 5 minutes that you have to do that role, because that's where the scoring comes. And they didn't have that. Instead, London went with a frankly crazy lineup with Martin and Neighbour both coming into the game fresh at the beginning of the second quarter, which is totally unfair on them. Because Reece is then, they're both free. You can't bring 2 new guys in the beginning of the second quarter to play the 4 and 5 spot, particularly if you think about it, when you've got Tawia. Okay, Kelly's got 2 fouls, but Tawia was your starting centre. He did fine. Why is he not come back in the game? Why do you need to go to Will Neighbour to guard Darius Nelson-Henry? And Darius Nelson-Henry, that's not going to work, and it didn't work. And it was the problem with that is that gives Leicester a target, right? And Leicester are smart. So that means that it was Nelson-Henry instead of Walker at this point, because they'd swapped over already. But that means that they look at that and they're thinking, well, I'm throwing the ball in. Darius. Because he's got Will Neighbour on, and Will Neighbour's probably played 5 minutes at centre all season. Right? And he's guarding him. Right? And that lineup, because Dirk had 2 fouls, so he's out of the game. Reece is tired, but Reece has to create shots in that lineup. But he's already played 12 minutes, so he's tired. So what happens is all the gains that they get from the starting 5, from defending and playing the starting 5 so well, all those gains are lost because they had no plan to deal with the second unit, and they didn't use the resources that they had. And that's not knocking, because Leicester's second unit is good. Adekoya is just under the radar, really good. Right, really good. Washington is under the radar, really good. McKenzie is going to be in your face, and he's going to give you what you want, and you know exactly what you're going to get from them. Right? And London weren't ready for that, and London didn't have a plan. And by the end of the second quarter, London had played 10 players. Which was probably at least too many for my liking.
And it was
those little things,
random little bit spots as well. That was the other.
That's the thing. You play 2 minutes here. It's almost like it's a dart throwing at the board. We've got him. We better use him. We've got him. We better use him. But Tawia was there. He was ready to play. You don't need a third centre. If you want rest Nelson, if he's just starting centre, you don't need a third centre. If Kelly's got 2 fouls, you want to sit him down. And And yeah, they just had lots of moving pieces at that point. But it remained. Sorry, move on. You take the game forward. I think.
So Nelson Henry, at the point you're talking about there, where he picked up Kelly's third foul and he went at Neighbour as well, got Leicester back level, 31 points apiece, and the offense, as you say, had just gone for London. The only thing they had was Reece made a couple of 3-pointers, and that sort of kept them close enough for halftime. But given how they'd come out, it seemed like a sort of not much of a return for the 20 minutes of effort they put out there.
Yeah, I thought Kelly was a little bit unlucky with his third foul, but I thought he was over emotional. I thought Nelson Henry caught him with a bit of a chicken wing as he went past him. That's what he was complaining about to the ref afterwards. The refs missed that one. But he can't foul. Once he's passed him, he can't, he's got 2 fouls, he can't go back and foul. The other foul he committed was an offensive foul where I think the possession before where he'd given the Riders guy Jackson, a high elbow.
Or something.
Jackson, it was that, and it was a foul. No question. And he got him. But he was wound up because of that. And that hurt them a lot. Williams picking up his third foul also hurt them a lot. And there was actually a case with about 3 minutes to go in the game, because I saw what you saw. I think I tweeted with 3 minutes to go in the first half. This is a big 3 minutes. Because I could see Leicester doing what they did to Manchester and just because London were not getting any shots at all that they wanted. And at that point, there was actually a case for putting Dirk back in the game, even with 3 fouls, which might sound crazy, because I was worried it wasn't survivable. Now it was survivable because Isaiah Reece basically pulled some shots out of his backside. He played like a guy that you'd wished had played like that all year. Let's be honest. And I know Drew said something afterwards about Lions disrespecting the league a little bit this year. And if you remember, go back to November in that game at Newcastle, which I was at, where Vince said afterwards basically the same thing about his team, which is, some of these guys need to learn about this league. What we saw from Isaiah Reece on Sunday was that there's no reason why London could possibly lose 10 games with him playing every game this season. And this can't happen. And with the talent that they've got with that. But they did for various reasons, not all to do with Isaiah Reece. But some of them, potentially because of that. And he kept them close, but the shots that they got when they had Kajini and Williams and Washburn in the game were very different to the shots that they got when they had anybody else in the game, and Leicester also, the other thing about Leicester is Crandall kind of played the first half in kind of second gear. And I was waiting to see, he played like he was comfortable in the environment. Even though Reece was making shots, he wasn't forcing his own. He didn't show that, the mental. I thought there might be a risk that there'd be some mental frailty there if things started going wrong, and he didn't show that, and that was kind of quite ominous. And I rather thought half time, and this is something I desperately got wrong. I thought at half time that this was going to be a Manchester game in London, and Leicester would be done. Leicester would be pulled away by the end of the third quarter, like it was in 2015 when we played London. It was a 20-point game after 3 quarters. I thought the game was going in the same direction. What I misunderstood and what I underestimated was the fact that they have a very potent offensive team when they get the right players on the court. We've talked about it.
Essentially, it was the same deal again in the second half, where the third quarter, London's offense is flying. Kajini now started making some shots. Tawia tremendously effective for them. They had a 6-minute spell where Leicester scored once. It was 20-2, and they were back up 10 again. London.
Yeah, and Kajini made a couple of shots that was big. Dirk is in the game. Space in the court. And they have a unit which has played together. And at virtually every other time, any time apart from those 6 players, right, which is Reece, Kajini, Williams, Washburn, and then Tawia or Kelly is the 6th, right? Those units had significant chemistry, an understanding of where they were going to be, a degree of belief. Anybody else comes on the court, they haven't played. Waterbury hasn't played all season. Now he's playing 20 minutes in the biggest game. You know, it's not what he does, it's how everybody else is comfortable around him. Do they know where he's going to be? Do they, you know, are they able to deal with that way? Martin didn't step off the bench in the second half. Neva didn't step off the bench in the second half. Kabosa didn't step off the bench in the second half. So he cut the rotation right back. But not the way he needed to. I'll get to that in a minute. Leicester were just short of cracking because Leicester got nothing from, nothing from Loving, nothing from Whelan. That's a big hole, you know. So those guys are being out effectived by Dirk Williams and Kajini at this point. You've got Washburn, who is doing everything that he's meant to do, as he always does. And there was a point, about 2.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Crandall missed a couple of foul shots, and he came down the next possession and chucked up an early 3, which I said was un-Leicester-like. I think it was an 8 or a 10-point game.
Yeah,
I tweeted that at the time. And basically said, look, Rob's going to have to make, and I tweeted that Rob's have to make a decision about Gino. Because at that point, you were thinking, so it might just, you know, this could actually, I still thought Leicester would win, but kind of the interest is peaked, which is actually, you know, are they going to crack? Because they haven't cracked all season, but they were getting to that point. And I thought the next 12 minutes were why Leicester have won and why London didn't win, because Leicester made the right decisions. He did take Gino out, which was the right decision. Put Connor in, put Kimball in. He went with Adekoya because he was getting nothing out of Loving. And Adekoya gives you more solidity and he gives you more defense. Doesn't give you much more offense, but that wasn't what they needed at the time. London were running away with the game. You know, high scoring game, London win. Low scoring game, Leicester guaranteed to win. So Leicester doubled down on what it was they needed to do. And that combined with London, I'm afraid, going away from what was working, and London kind of moving towards a defensive aspect to it as well, which was a nightmare for them because they had to score. That and then Connor running the team and not having a plan for Connor, that allowed Leicester to come back into it. And once Leicester got back in, you know, and it was just like the game at the Copper Box you guys talked about on the telly. Once London took out Kajini at the beginning of the fourth quarter, because Williams and Kajini played the whole third quarter with Reece, and they scored, what, 29 points? Something like that, right? And for me, at that point, I might have tweeted this, I can't remember, so people can say it was after the fact, but I certainly did during the fourth quarter. At that point, you forget about your subs. You know, you got 10 minutes to play. You've got timeouts. You know, the game, you've got timeouts, you've got quarter breaks. You're constantly getting another minute out of your guys, another minute, right? Constantly, keep playing because you know that to beat Leicester, you're probably going to have to break them. And that means you're going to have to keep going. You know, you're going to have to keep going and put the pressure on them and let those guys get a rhythm. And they didn't. He took Kajini out and brought, I think, Ward Hibbert in as the sixth guy. It's all right defensively, but it hurt them offensively. Reece isn't at this point played 30-odd minutes, so he's not going to pull the shots that he pulled in the first half because he's tired. And if you remember the threes that he did shoot in the fourth quarter, they were all short. Yeah. Right, and they weren't bad shots. You know, the shots he had to shoot. Then Kajini came out, and then 2 minutes later, Williams came out, which was for me was just, you know, I think he might have got his fourth foul, but I don't care. I don't know if it was before or after he got his fourth foul. It's like, no, Dirk, you're playing the whole way. You know, this is a final. You've got 10 minutes to play. You know, this is the lineup that's winning the game for us. I'm not messing with you. You're in the game. It's not like the NBA, right? In the NBA, the players are trained to play certain minutes. They have timeouts and quarter breaks, which last 3 minutes. They have referees.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
I've done an NBA game with no commercial breaks.
Yeah, there you go.
And had to talk for 5 minutes during a timeout.
Yeah. They have referees going to the monitor every 30 seconds. Right? Yeah. So the game stretches over a period of time, right? In the BBL, in the final, that doesn't happen. No. You know, you have teams aren't in the penalty in the fourth quarter, right? You're generally going to save your timeouts for the end. So there's not going to be any timeouts called at that point. Even if you do, it's only for a minute. Okay, you sit somebody down, think, oh, I'll give him a bit of rest at the 8-minute mark, right? You might be at the 5-minute mark by the time he's wiped his face, wiped his forehead, and had a drink of water, and he's going back in the game. That isn't a rest. That isn't sufficient rest. That isn't sufficient to take out one of your main guys in the fourth quarter of a game. Not of a meaningful game, not with a balls to the wall game, which is for the marbles at the end of the season. And they did that, and then they couldn't score. So you know, you haven't scored for 2.5 minutes, and you take Dirk Williams out of the game.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where I think, you know, ultimately the decision making of Leicester in keep it. And
so the interesting thing about it here is because Washington did the same thing as he did in the first half, 3-pointers either side of half time. Was they had Washington out there, they had McKenzie out there, and Walker was there as well. And as you say, we watched this team every week. You kind of know when Rob's going to make a substitution, who's going to come in at what point, and he left that bench unit out for a little longer than usual because they were on top in the game and they were up 13. And this goes back to the point I think we discussed it, was it last week, which is he's been there so many times, Rob, that he knows Connor is winning me the game here, so Connor stays on court rather than this is where Connor normally comes out of the game, or Adekoya is on the floor in the last minute of the game. There are not, I don't know how many games this year where Adekoya has been on at the end of a close game.
Absolutely. You know, absolutely. And I even tweeted with, I wasn't even sure we would bring Crandall back straight away because he brought because Mackenzie's a fourth quarter player. You know, you couldn't take Connor out. Connor was playing till the end, right? And Mackenzie's a fourth quarter player. And Mackenzie, I say, he played like 6 minutes in this game. And, you know, and which is an incredible luxury because, you know, and he won't complain. He's not the type of guy who's going to go and kick his feet because he's clearly team orientated. He's got the coaches back and all that stuff. But I thought he might leave Mackenzie a little bit longer as well because I could see that going the way that was going. But I think the 3 or 4 minutes around the quarter break that Crowder got, you know, helped him see the big picture. You know, and on top of that, the fact that if you leave when you're down 10 when you go out and suddenly you come back and you're at 1. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling, right? So I think, you know, that was a balance thing, but you know, you've got your league MVP, then he has to be on the court at the end. Question was how much at the end, but he didn't keep the same rules for Loving and Jackson, who've been his guys through the season, or Loving and Whelan. You know, he went with the guys that were working. Now he has a luxury to that. You know, I mean, I think Rowe might have called it genius coaching to get Crown a bit of rest, but actually it was, you know, you've got Connor, you know, it was as bog standard as you're ever going to get. But it gave them the benefit of him having had that rest, and also the ability to have, you know, 8 or 9 quality starters in your team who all know their roles. It's a key to a good team. Now, London ended up only playing, I think, 6 players in the second half. Might be wrong. Don't think Kapoza played. Don't think Neighbour played. Don't think Martin played. So 7 players because they played Wyatt and whatever. But sorry, briefly we'll get onto it. But they didn't have the right guys on at the right time, and when they had a drought, they didn't have the best 5 on. Yeah,
which is the thing we've been talking about for weeks and weeks.
And the other thing, again, to validate everything that we say, which is always good to talk about.
It's always good to validate ourselves.
It is. First 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. Most important 4 minutes in the game, apart from the last 2.
Yeah.
Every time, you know, you've got to have your lineups on. You have your lineups right, and they didn't quite. Sorry, move on.
So London didn't score for the first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. Leicester scored the first 13 points, and then Tawia gets, because the other thing was Walker was on. We talked about that. Nelson Henry then comes on with 4 minutes to go. He would normally have made that change earlier, Rob.
But he was kind of separated. Those two were kind of just splitting as and when. I thought in this game, I didn't think there was a pattern to it. It was just one or the other.
So Tawia gets an and 1, which is their first score of the quarter with 4:04 on the clock. It's 70-68. He converts the free throw. Darren Nelson Henry comes back into the game at that point with 4 minutes to go. We'll just go through play by play.
Yeah.
Leicester come down. Crandall elbow jump shot, knocks it down. 72-68. You think this is Gino against Reece here. This is their stage, if you like. This is what they do. London come back the other way. Towie on the low block, missed the jump hook, but a great play from Washington from Washburn coming down the lane, tipped it in to make it a 2-point game. 3:26 to go. Came back the other way. Crandall, the high pick and roll. They basically ran the high pick and roll almost every play in the last 4 minutes. But he got up in the air and then he was trying to, normally he's able to find a way out of that. And that time
Dan, this was the play, right? This was the play. And I tweeted immediately because he threw it to Towie, who stayed in front of Nelson Henry, right? And the reason he did that was because if you go back, Washburn was guarding him. Washburn chased him off the screen. Washburn is longer. Washburn is more athletic than anybody else that had to guard him. And I tweeted, you go back on my tweet line, I tweeted immediately after this, after that, on that play, that this game is going to come down to Crandall v Washburn, right? To how Washburn defends Crandall. And Washburn didn't see him until 30 seconds to go. After, and we'll get, and this is ultimately the decision you're going to go through. But that decision cost London a chance of winning this game. Forget what happened at the end. That decision to move Washburn onto the wing and to have Ward Hibbert guard Crandall down the stretch, when you really shouldn't have been on the court, to be blunt, because it should have been Cagini and Williams. Those decisions cost London a chance to win the game. Sorry, move on.
So, as you say, Towie wrapped it up. It was a jump ball, London possession. Dirk drives to the basket, gets a call, makes 1 for 2 from the free throw line, 72-71. Leicester come back the other way, again, the high pick and roll. Crandall into the key, he misses. The ball is sort of knocked by Nelson Henry and then to Adekoya, and he slaps it in to the backcourt. And Washington goes back and retrieves that. And just in case people...
I think on that play, he was guarded by Washburn as well, because I think he forced him left. And London did a good job of forcing Crandall. They had a good game plan for Crandall. They did a good job of forcing him left the whole game. And I think he shot the floater going left, and it was banged away. And I think that was the last play that Washburn had on him, because it was 2 consecutive misses that he forced Crandall into. And then they came back down.
So just to clarify the rule, because I tried to explain it in real time, but they got a quick score. But essentially, if the ball is tipped in like that on a rebound, that's not deemed as a possession. So even though
possession, nobody's got the ball.
Even though it's the Leicester player that's tipped it into the backcourt, it's not a backcourt violation. No. But Washburn clearly didn't know that, because he was going to the referee. Why is there not a call? Why is there not a call?
He should know that, because it's the same in the NBA. So, I mean, he's had a cup of coffee in the NBA, I think, hasn't he? So Lasker.
I think it was tea, according to Lasker.
Tea, was it? I don't think they drink tea in the NBA.
So Washington brings it back forward. Good head fake from Jackson, I thought. He drove to the basket, but Reese really timed it well. He could have gone quick and committed a foul, but he managed to block the shot instead. So London get the ball back, 2:36. Yeah. 2:36 to go. And then you were talking earlier about Reese's minutes and the shots that
he pulled up a shot three on the right wing, didn't he?
Yeah. Transition 3. I
think that was an advice shot. I think I tweeted that at the time. He hasn't got a shooter in the game. He hasn't got Cagini in the game. He can't. They're helping off Ward Hibbert. So he's thinking, I've got to make a play. He hasn't got Kelly in the game to throw lobs to. That's another thing. Towie played great, but I'm having Kyler Kelly in for the last 2.5 minutes when I need to stop. Don't care if he's got 4 fouls.
So Leicester come back. That shot short. Leicester come back, get the rebound. Crandall into the lane, really nice step around Towie, reverse lane, 1 second on the shot clock, 74-71 with 2:01 to go. London call a timeout.
Yeah, he went right and then came back to his left and finished off with his right hand reverse. And Ward Hibbert that wasn't in the play. London call a timeout. Would Crandall even make that move if Kelly's in the game?
It'd be a pretty spectacular finish if he did.
Exactly, and these are the decisions that make that ultimately the difference between winning and losing. Loving and Adekoya getting that that tip back, which you talk about. Would Loving have made that play? Loving's probably out on the 3-point line, but that's not what they needed at that point. They needed grit and grind. So that's Adekoya's in the game. London need defense, and Kelly's not in the game. Sorry.
Reese comes down the other way, passes it into Washburn at the high post, hands it back to Reese, takes it to the basket, and Nelson Henry comes over for the help. It was a really good finish. He had to put it up high to get it over Nelson Henry. 74-73, 144 to go.
They ran a nice play out of the timeout to get Reese the ball off the handoff of the horn set, going to his right. They run that play quite often this year, and he finishes really well going to his right. So that was a nice play. You know, I was impressed with that.
And then Leicester again, high pick and roll. Ward Hibbett and Tawi are both sort of drawn to him, and he just sort of throws a little lob to Nelson Henry. 73-76, 129 to go.
You have to break. You have to be able to impact the Crandall Nelson Henry pick and roll down the stretch, and they couldn't. And I'm just thinking, though, you know, and it comes. Where's the game being played? Where's the game being won? The game is being won with those four players because London aren't really helping off the wings. You know, Washburn's not in the play defensively. Over the other side of the court, Reese isn't in the play defensively. It's Crandall and Nelson Henry going at Ward Hibbett and Tawiah. Well, Ward Hibbett and Tawiah probably haven't been in that situation all season, where Ward Hibbett's defending a screen and roll and Tawiah's a guy in the middle.
Yeah,
not all season. You know, they haven't. You know, it's probably new on them, entirely and utterly new on them. And you've got Washburn, who is, you know, an all-league defender and probably one of the best we've seen in a number of years. He stood on the wing. He's not involved in the play. You know, you've got your leading shot blocker sat on the bench, and you're going to win the game by getting stops. If you don't stop Crandall, you can't win the game. Bottom line, he's the MVP. He's going to win that game for Leicester unless you stop him. And if he's looking at that and he's thinking, oh, I've got Ward Hibbett and Tawiah to go against, he's comfortable. And he was comfortable at the end of the game. He's more comfortable at the end of the game than he was at any other point in the game.
Lions come back the other way. It's essentially the same play they ran back with the handoff at the high post from Washburn to Reese. This time Washington managed to stay in front of him, but he had a nice little stutter to get along the baseline and find a bit of space to lay it in. 76 75.
Yeah, it was isolation for Reese. Yeah, it's good. Again, it was a nice play. It was isolation for Reese. Use the space. Reese attack the rim. Use your size. Don't worry about your legs on his jump shot. You know, London offensively near the end, you know, Reese was excellent throughout the game, but that wasn't where that game was being won.
No, it was Crandall Nelson Henry again. This time they had two high screens. Ward Hibbett didn't switch on that one, and Crandall makes a shot at the top of the key with 53 seconds to go. 78.
Just a rhythm jump shot going to his right. You know, through the whole game they'd been sending. If you watch it, particularly when he's on the left-hand side of the floor, they were basically defending him sideways on. They were stopping him coming to his right. They were literally funneling him to his left the whole game, and he can still make plays, but he's not quite as comfortable because he's right-handed. And that one, he comes off where he wants to go, comes off to his right, picks his spot. He's got nobody anywhere near him. And you're asking, you know, you're giving the MVP in an open 16-foot jump shot in a rhythm situation with 53 seconds left to go. You know, well, what do you expect? He's going to make it. You know, it's not a question of doubt. Again, it's their defense at that point. And again, Washburn's not involved in that defensive possession at all. Despite the fact that the 2 times in 3 minutes to go, he got stops. Nobody else has. And what got me about it was, you're going to talk about in a minute and what happens next. But on the last possession of the game with 30 seconds to go, he's guarding him again.
So Reese comes down the other way, shoots a 3-point shot over Jackson, which is short. 33 seconds to go. Leicester rebound. You've got your rule. You trust your defense there. I was sort of wondering down 3 whether you might think of a foul. 33 seconds ago.
No. You got to play D. Yeah. You have to play D. Yeah, maybe get a steal if you're lucky, but you know, I think the moment that you commit to fouling in a game, you're hoping that the other team's flaws will help you win it. The difficulty is, outside of Jackson, Leicester's foul shooters are.
They missed 6 or 7 in this game.
They did, but I'm not backing Crandall to miss a foul shot. Are you in that situation?
No, probably not.
No, I'm not backing Connor to miss a foul shot. And even if they make 1, it's a 4-point game, and then you have to score, and then you're fouling again. You know, there's just too many things I think which have to go right. So I'm happy for them to keep playing defense at that point and then run out and get a shot. I'm not happy with the fact that Kajini's not in the game. I'm up at this point. My Twitter button is my exclamation marks are piling on, because because unfortunately Waterbury didn't score a point. He's not being effective defensively, and you're basically taking your weapon out of the game. So that over the 3 minutes before the end of the game, it was a team that knew itself against a team that hadn't figured itself out, despite the fact they've been together for 10 months. That's what it was. And that was the only difference.
So as you've alluded to, Washburn was guarding Gino this time down. Leicester running some clock. There's 9 seconds differential between shot and game clock. High screen, switch to Tawia. Crandall goes again down the left-hand side of the lane. But Washburn sort of dived out at him as well. He's falling over off the glass. It wasn't that far. It wasn't that far away for an incredibly difficult shot.
Yeah, but how difficult is that shot compared with the one he shot 30 seconds before?
Yeah, much more.
Because you got an all-league defender sending him to his weak side, having him fall away, right? And yeah, he can make that shot, but the numbers are in your favor. Now, I can only think that Washburn basically said, look, I got him, because there's not enough time for the coaches to point out, you swap, right? I think and that's the dysfunctionality of London coming through when it really, really matters. We have that rule requirement, and there are only certain guys you have to be sure, there are certain players you can match up on, you can change matchups on all the time. But there has to be absolute clarity in relation to who's guarding the ball against Leicester down the stretch. And there wasn't, and I think Washburn took the decision himself to do that. As I say, not having your shot, however well Chris Tawia played, not having your all-league shot blocker in the game when he's got a foul to give at the end of the game, to me is just inexcusable. I mean, he played 10 minutes in that game, and oh man, Kyler, come to Newcastle, get paid a quarter as much, and I guarantee you'll be playing more than that. Even if I'm shouting at the coach from the sideline to make you do it, right? Because what a weapon to have, to be sat over there. Anyway, but no, so they play good defense.
So it comes off the backboard into the ring, and it sort of rattles about and then bounces on the back and out. And at this point, Adekoya is in the corner, essentially on his own. And Tawia and Nelson Henry and one other player who was guarding Adekoya, that I can't think who it was, go after the rebound. And it's sort of tipped by Tawia, but straight to Adekoya, who's come in off the wing to see if he can get involved in the play. And basically, that should win the game for Leicester right there, because they've got the ball. There's 11 seconds to go, and they're already up 3. But Adekoya did the right thing. Adekoya did the right thing. He brought it out. He gave it to Connor and thought, Connor, you're the free throw shooter. And what Connor did was, again, inherently the right thing to do, because he passed the ball back he passed it back to Adekoya, because he didn't want to get fouled. He wanted the clock to keep ticking.
Keep away, yeah.
And Adekoya, I think at that point, is thinking, I really ought not to have the ball, because somebody else should have Connor or Gino should have the ball for the free throws, and they'll come running to me. So he wanted to quickly get it back to Washington. Only problem was Dirk Williams was in the way, and Dirk Williams stole the ball. And suddenly, indeed, suddenly, Dirk has the ball. He's looking to take off down court. There's the last few seconds, a chance to potentially tie it. But Nelson Henry was able to knock it loose so that Dirk didn't quite get away and clean on the dribble. And then the speed of Washington chasing back, he's able to come and deflect the ball away. And it goes out of bounds for a sideline ball right in front of the Leicester bench for London. 2.8 seconds to go. And they call a timeout. And then it comes down to the play that, everybody looked at and went, what was that?
Yeah.
So let me, they have a timeout. They come out of the timeout. They've got on the court Kajini, who's 1 of 8 from
Really?
3-point range,
Okay.
Dirk, who's 1 of 3 from 3-point range, and Reece, who's 5 of 11 from 3-point range. Nobody else in the game for London made a 3. So, and they're your 3 best three-point shooters. So you're expecting one of those 3 to go to get it. Now, I said on commentary, and you might hear the surprise in my tone there is, oh, Reece is inbounding the ball, because I'm thinking Reece is shooting the shot, was my thought. Now, I would settle for Dirk and I would settle for Kajini, but in the game, given the way it's gone, I thought Reece would be shooting the ball. And with 2.8 seconds, I think I said something like, you could get it back, because in theory, you could lob it in, get a hand off, one dribble, but that's risky in my view. If you had 4.8 seconds, maybe, but not 2.8 seconds. So that was the first thing that I just sort of went, oh, I would have had him on the court. So you've got the rest of the 5. They've got Washburn, Kajini, Tawia, and Dirk Williams in a stack at the base of the key on the opposite side of the key to the ball in that order. So Dirk is at the bottom. Dirk, then Tawia, then Kajini, then Washburn. Dirk runs up around the 3 screens, but Leicester are just going, we're switching everything anyway, mate, so you can just run. And he turns the corner and he runs, and there is who was it was waiting for him? I can't think now. There was somebody right. Oh, it was Loving. Defender, I think it was Loving. It was Loving that was stood there like this going, all right. And Dirk then runs back down the key. He doesn't run directly to the corner. He sort of goes down, and maybe he'd have got to the corner in the end. But in that motion, I'm thinking he's not the option here. So I'm already going, wait, so you've got Reece throwing the ball in, so he's not the option. Dirk seems to be a decoy, so he's not the option. So it can only be Kajini at that point, to me, unless you know Tawi is going to dash out to the corner and shoot a 3. So that I didn't quite get that either. Tawia is stood there, not really screening anybody. Washburn is stood there next to Jackson, not really doing anything. And Kajini, at the point at which the ball is left Reece's hands, has moved 1 foot. And by that, I mean an actual foot rather than distance. He's lit in so they're in the key, and he's taken not even a step, a half step, when the ball has left his hands, when the ball has left Reece's hands. So even if the pass was thrown perfectly, he probably wouldn't have got all the way to the corner by that point. And even if there was a screen set, which there wasn't for some reason, he probably wouldn't have, he'd have been open, but he wouldn't have got far enough out. So he'd had to catch it and dribble backwards, in my view. And then the pass was so far short that Crandall, when he caught it, was closer to the key than he was to the 3-point line. It was miles short of where it needed to be. And he didn't even have to jump. It was just like, and interestingly, in the post-match interview, he said, oh, we had somebody on the ball. He must have got a deflection, because even he thought there's no way that pass can fall that far short without somebody getting a hand on it, because it was so far short. And the other reason that I would have Reece on the court to shoot the shot is he leads the league in turnovers this year.
Yeah, he's probably also the best passer though, so it's a difficult one. I go against the grain a little bit with this, because I actually like the play. I really do. I tweeted almost immediately afterwards. We ran it about 3 years ago.
Lasker was talking about it in the bar afterwards.
Yeah, you know, it's on. You'll see it's on my tweet. There's actually a clip of it.
Yeah,
Kai knocking down the 3.
It. When Lasker said it, I remembered it. I don't like the pass. There's too many things.
No, it's called the wall play. Yeah, it's called the wall play, because basically those guys set up a wall. You've got 2.25 seconds to go. It's a high risk, high reward play, because if it works, you get an open corner 3 with the ball coming towards the guy with a chance to get his feet set. Okay, so in relation to the quality of the shot you're going to get, you pull that play off, you're getting the best quality shot you are ever going to get, unless short of an utter brain malfunction by the defense, which Leicester aren't going to do. Right. So from that perspective, I think it's a bold play. It's a bold play, and I like the fact they drew. Also, the fact that they hadn't run it all season, so no one knew it was coming. I've watched all their games this season. If you can tell me where they've run it before, believe me. The only problem is, I don't think they've run it much in practice either. Because it's muscle memory. That part that is not an easy pass. Let's be clear about this. Reece throwing the ball over whoever's guarding him to a spot where there is nobody there, 60 feet away in the far corner of the court. That is a tough pass. Also, the timing, as you've said, has to be perfect. So it has to be. If you watch the one that we pulled off, I hadn't, to be honest, I hadn't seen us practice that either, but Fab must have done it when I wasn't at practice, because literally as soon as the ball's handed to Fab, he throws it. So the guys know that as soon as the ball is handed, that's when Kai splits to the corner. So there's no kind of looking around. The timing has to be perfect. And if you look at it, they actually got it partly right, insofar as the way the defense was reacting. Because you're right, Dirk Williams is just a decoy. He's just to get out of there. He's just to take a man out of there, right? Washburn is doing exactly what he's meant to do. Jackson's nowhere near that pass, right? He's screening Jackson. He's running the play, like a pro he is, whatever, doing what he's meant to do. Adekoya is actually defending Tauia, but Adekoya is playing normal defense, and he's actually off him in the lane. It's because he's got a quarter of an eye on Dirk Williams, right? So he's not in any position to recover out to the corner. Okay, so Tauia's man isn't going to be able to switch that screen when Tauia screens Crandall. Because if Tauia screens Crandall properly, okay, then the only guy who can get out there is Adekoya. But he's got 2 feet in the paint. He's probably not the swiftest to get out there anyway. The distance is too great. At the very least, Cugini would have a pump fake, sidestep, and open shot, right? But Tauia doesn't screen him. And I can only think, and before the play happens, you see them pointing, Washburn, you see there's some uncertainty about what's going on in that little stack. And that to me is, uncertainty is death at that time. The idea of that play, I think for that guy, and I don't even have a problem with Reece throwing at him, because he might have the most turnovers, but he's also the only one who passes the ball, let's be honest, on that team. Dirk doesn't pass it much, Cugini doesn't pass it much, nobody else. So he's to make that pass, he would be the one I trust. Maybe Washburn, but you want Washburn setting the screen, really. But the question is, who have you practiced it with? Who have you done it in practice with? Who's been on the court? That's the thing. Who have you done it with? I would, but Tauia doesn't screen Crandall. Crandall actually takes a step towards Dirk Williams, because Crandall's got Dirk Williams in his head as well, quite rightly. Now, as Dirk goes that way, there's a point when the ball is just in the air where Crandall is so screenable because he's there, and Tauia actually moves out of his way. And if Tauia steps in his way, that ball can bounce twice before it gets to Cugini. It doesn't really matter. Cugini's going to have a chance, at the very least, with his feet set, to get something off.
But not how it was thrown. It wouldn't have made it to the corner how it was thrown.
Well, if it screened Crandall, it would have, because Crandall wouldn't have been there.
But the arc of it would have fallen short.
It might have bounced twice first.
Yeah.
It might have bounced twice first, yeah. But at the end of the day, he's going to get the ball. He's going to have the ball in his hands. It might not be in rhythm or whatever, but he's going to be facing the basket with a little bit of space. And I just, you can't run stuff that people haven't practiced, and that was my impression. Great idea. Brave play call. You could just throw it to somebody on a curl and they chuck up something off bounce or try and bait the foul. But, you get yourself a proper shot for potentially the purest shooter in the league. They were that close to doing it, but they didn't know what they were doing at the end. And, as I say, what Tauia is doing is beyond me. He literally screened nobody. And the one person that you're looking at screening is Cugini's man. Cugini's man has to be the one who screened. And then if they can switch out, they switch out. And as I say, if you haven't seen it, go on to Twitter. There's a link to an Eagles clip whereby we ran it. and it wasn't entirely smooth. But that's how it could have worked, you know. But you know, preparation, performance, it all comes into it. You know, and if you're not ready for it at the end, if you're not ready, if you can't perform under pressure, you can't execute under pressure. It doesn't matter how many clever ideas you have, doesn't matter how many good plays you draw up. And I don't think the London coaching staff did a bad job in this game. You know, it's a hard game. They got a lot of players. It's a big environment. It's a big energy. It's big decisions to make. But they had to do a great job to win, right? And they didn't do a great job. I don't think they did a bad job, but I think some of the decisions were at the time questionable, and unfortunately left them just a little bit short. Also, the inflection points in the game, which were at the 2-minute mark in the first quarter and at the 2-minute mark in the third quarter, they weren't ready for. And they weren't able to, you know, that the foot on the throat moments.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't able to do it. And that's experience of finals. It's understanding that you might only need 5 players to win a final. You know, I mean, I only ever talk about the games that we won because I remember the ones that we lost because we basically didn't do great jobs as coaches. But the ones where we win, the most memorable when we came back from 15 down against Leicester with 5 guys. 5 guys playing for 16 minutes. I think maybe Flanoy might have played a minute sub to rest somebody, but that was it. You know, it was Fletcher, Chapman, Lasker, Lasker, Martin and Smith, something like that. I don't know, can't remember now. But it was 5 small guys, 5 shooters.
Yeah.
You know, and might not have been Chapman. Right? Yeah, it might be Chapman, yeah. You know, and that was it. There was not a question of, I need to get him a blow, I'll get him a blow. It was like, hang on, this is working. We got to run with it. And I don't think they were brave enough like that. You don't need to give Dirk Williams 2.5 minutes rest in the fourth quarter. He sat down for 3 minutes and you've lost a third of the fourth quarter. You know, that is not a proportionate breakdown of the advantage you get of having him fresh. To give him a 3-minute break to miss 3 minutes of the game. It's just not. And as I say, they placed an incredible amount of trust in Ward Hibbert, which I think was probably a little bit unfair on him because he hardly played. And then to give him the key role at the end of the game, and all the other guys would be, you know, people like Washburn and Reese would be looking around saying, hang on, he's not been here all season. I need to be doing this, you know. And I just thought, so they made decisions which were justifiable. You could say they were kind of shot in the dark decisions, a couple of them, but not entirely enough to be great. Leicester did what they did. I thought they kept their composure really well, but they are a product of what they've been for 9 months. That's not a product of that game. You know, ultimately, it's like having an encyclopedia. You know, it's like having the Encyclopedia Britannica. But go back 25 years or 30 years. Leicester have got all the books. Rob's seen every combination. He knows his guys backwards. They've been together all season. They're doing what they're doing. They've had all played in certain roles, right? London have maybe got volume. London have got the volume beginning with A. You know, that's it. They've got 6 guys. The rest of them, they don't know what's coming. They can't know what's coming because they've got no repetitions. You can't have the situation where you have 2 guys who basically not been in the screen row defense all season, defending the last 3 minutes of the game against the MVP with the championship on the line. And to expect your team to do, you have to understand, you have to have an understanding of the liabilities and the weaknesses of your team as much as the strengths. You have to know how to hide those weaknesses. You have to know how to maximize the strengths of the players. And Washburn has to be in that action. He has to be in that. He has to be impacting it somehow. And he wasn't. And that, you know, that's kind of a referendum on their season, really. You know, tons of talent. Probably still should have won that game on the shots that they made on the road. But they were beaten by a unit who knew each other backwards, with a coach who's been there time and time again and knows how to build a team up all the way through the season. And hopefully, it will mean that when they come to put their roster together for next year, their first thought will not be who's been playing in the J League, but their first thought will be who's going to coach. Because the talent level in the league now is such that there is a real premium on coaching now. I think I've said it before.
Yeah.
There's a real premium on coaching now. Because most teams can afford to pay 8 good players. Most teams have got 8 good professional players who've played at certain levels to get themselves a gig in this league. And how you utilize them, and how you hide their weaknesses, and how you maximize their strengths, and how you have them buy into the system, and how you have them buy into the targets. That's going to be the difference between winning and losing. That's why Leicester won 3 this year. And to be honest, they'll be frustrated they lost to Bristol.
Yeah.
Because if that game had come at a slightly different time, they probably wouldn't have lost it.
Yeah.
But that's the season, So there we go. Crandall was the MVP.
Crandall, MVP, 23 points, 9 of 19 shooting, 7 assists, 2 somethings I've written down. I don't know what it is. 2 steals as well. Nelson Henry, 15 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 6 rebounds.
Here's the crazy thing, Dan. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is that Gino was -10.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to get to
You're going
that.
to get to that. Sorry,
Washington was 0 of 5 from 2, 4 of 7 for 3 for 12 points, and Jackson 5 of 8 for 12. But the plus minuses, the only players in plus numbers for Leicester were Washington plus 14, Adekoya plus 14, McKenzie plus 13, Walker plus 4. All their bench players.
McKenzie must have been plus 13 about 7 minutes. And that means that London lost the non-Crandall minutes, 8 minutes that Crandall didn't play. London lost them by 13 points. Right? That's a failure of planning, failure of organization, because that can't happen in that game. You have to respect that. Let's have 9 starters. You have to respect all of them. I'm not sure London did. And unfortunately, those 3 bench players for London, those 4 bench players from Leicester that you've just mentioned, utterly outplayed what London put on the court. And they outplayed them, not just because of the way they played, but because of the rules that they had and the timing and the comfortability in those rules. Comfortableness in their comfort in those rules that they've basically manicured and that they've worked on all season. And yet you have London throwing out Neighbour and Martin at the beginning of the second quarter when I can't remember them playing together, not in meaningful minutes. Caboza at the end of the first half, when I don't know what he was on for. I just didn't, what was his role? What was he meant to do? He was just, here's another body. You may as well put Ward Hibbert back in the game. You think, we're giving him a chance. You're not giving him a chance. You give him 2 minutes at the end of the second quarter in a role that he's not used to, with no idea what he's meant to do. That is not a chance. That is just torpedoing your own chances. You've got to find out who your guys are. You got to trust them. You got to commit to them. And they didn't do that. So the little things in the game.
Leicester, we've talked about their 3-point shooting this season as well. They're only 4 of 12 from behind the arc. London were led by Reese's 29 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 turnovers, 12 of 28 shooting, 38 minutes and 36 seconds he played. Dirk Williams had 14 points, was a plus 15. Tawi 9 points and 14 rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds. Just, we talked about London's 3-point shooting this year as well, 7 of 27. That's, I guess, perhaps the big gem.
Well, they were never going to make threes. I knew they weren't going to make threes. I said that last week. Leicester weren't going to let them make threes. The only guys who made threes for Leicester themselves was Connor, and that's because they didn't respect Connor's shot, which was just utterly nuts, because clearly none of them listen to this podcast. Beyond that,
well, Connor was 4 of 7, so everybody else was.
Exactly. So he made them all.
Sorry,
he made 3. They made 3. He made nearly them all. The final thing about London, and this is the thing, is you have to have a plan through the year, right? You can't tell me that Reece couldn't have played 34 minutes in that game and Lockhart ran the team for 6 minutes whilst McKenzie was on the court. You can't tell me that. If it's not going to be Capoza to put into guard Washington, put put Dre Lockhart in. He knows, experience is worth so much more than anything else in those circumstances. Yeah, for the past 3 months, Bradley Cabota's played a lot, but he's not been played in the finals. So why did that happen? Andre Lockhart's not played at all, so they've had no coherent second unit without Isaiah Reese. And that comes back to bite you because Isaiah Reese has to play 38 minutes. And at the end of the game, when he's getting good looks, he's short on his jump shot. Well, that's not a surprise. He's playing 38 minutes. It's all the planning throughout the season that goes into it. And if you have 3 head coaches and multiple people behind the scenes, you don't have a coherent plan through the course of the season. This is what happened. The little things go against you. The small margins add up. And unfortunately, a team that you may have more talent than beats you because they're a far more cohesive unit. That's probably the end of my ranting about.
That's probably the end. The only stat I didn't give was they had 18 offensive rebounds, London, but only 10 second chance points. Leicester had 9 and 9.
Well, that's the thing with Tauia though. Kelly. If Kelly gets an offensive rebound, it's generally a dunk, right?
Yeah.
If a dunk before it comes down again.
Yeah.
If Tauia gets an offensive rebound, it's a bit harder. He doesn't have the same. He has that physicality to get the ball, but he's not as good a finisher. He doesn't play above the rim as much. So you get those extra shots, but what are they worth? As you say, it becomes that's another difference between Tauia and Kelly, and that's why I say 100% of Tauia is great, but if it only results in 20% of Kelly, and Kelly had 6 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 block shots in 10 minutes, and part of it was his own part through foul trouble, but at the end of the day, he only had 4 fouls. 4 isn't 5.
Yeah,
I'm using every foul. I'm using every single foul of Kyler Kelly in that game, because of those tip-ins and those dunks and all those things he can give you, which can impact the defense. So, I thought Connor was the most impactful player. The shots he made were made at the key times. It meant that Gino could come in comfortable, knowing that the rest of the team had his back and he could take his team home, basically. I think he has to be the MVP with 23, 7, and 5. But if Leicester win, I think Gino's probably always going to be the MVP simply because he has the ball in his hands so much, for them to win. But he played a good game. Played a really sound, controlled. I thought he played far better than he did in the cup final. Under more pressure, I thought he played far better. So he and Ty deserved it, and Rob deserves it as well. So we all got to find a way of beating them.
Indeed. So that will do it for another season in the British Basketball League. We'll park it away for the summer. We might come back next year again, Dave. Who knows? See if we can get to season 3.
Only if people promise to listen to us.
Yeah, indeed.
Actually,
we'll sign it off. I almost feel like we have to sign it off by going like a bat out of hell. That was our thing.
Stop it. Well, I would actually just like to thank you, because what people don't realize is that whilst this show is a show, is it a show? What do they call it? That's the show. Sorry, my fault. This show is 90. Yeah, whilst this show is like all shows are 90% preparation. 95% of that 90% preparation is done by you.
We don't do masses of preparation.
You say we do. I know that's a royal way, I think. I know it's quite liberating to be able to kind of come along and just often have you take me to all the things that I've forgotten. So I really do appreciate the efforts of that. But there is for all, I'm dealing here with a man who drives a minibus to Scotland and then comes back and fills in his charts and does and then does his commentaries in his EuroLeague and all this stuff. So your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much. Let's go now. Come on, let's go. We've had enough. And maybe if all things go well in September, we will, like a sinner at the gates of heaven, come crawling on back to you.
Crawling on.
Goodbye.
I like that. Goodbye. I like that.